morning sun cast long shadows across the two-lane highway as Andre Mitchell pulled his blue pickup truck into the gravel parking lot of Rosie's roadside diner. His shoulders ached from the 5-hour drive, but a smile tugged at his lips. The weekend with his aging parents had been good for his soul. His mom's cooking and his dad's stories always brought him back to center. Andre checked his watch. Just past 9 a.m. He had plenty of time to grab some breakfast before heading back to finish prepping for tomorrow's classes at the community center. The thought of Monday's self-defense class for seniors made him chuckle. Those old-timers had more fight in them than most of the young recruits he'd trained with years ago. The bell above the diner door jingled as Andre stepped inside. The familiar smell of coffee and bacon wrapped around him like an old friend. Rosie's wasn't fancy. Just a dozen worn booths with red vinyl seats, a counter with spinning stools, and walls covered in local sports teams' memorabilia and faded license plates from across the country. "Sit anywhere you like, honey," called a waitress with graying hair pulled into a messy bun. Her name tag read Dottie, and deep smile lines framed her eyes. Andre slid into a booth by the window, one that gave him a clear view of both the entrance and the parking lot. Old habits from his military days that he couldn't shake. He never talked much about those days. The folks in Pine Creek knew him as Coach or Mr. M from the community center, not as Chief Petty Officer Mitchell, who had led high-risk operations in places most Americans couldn't find on a map. "Coffee?" Dottie appeared with a steaming pot. "Please." Andre nodded, his deep voice gentle despite his imposing frame. At 6'2" with broad shoulders and arms sculpted by years of training, he could intimidate without trying. But his eyes, warm brown with laugh lines at the corners, told a different story. "Know what you want or need a minute?" She filled his cup with the dark brew. "I'll take the sunrise special with wheat toast." "Please." Andre had been ordering the same meal, 2 eggs over easy, bacon, and hash browns, every Sunday morning for the 3 years since he'd moved to Pine Creek. As Dottie walked away, Andre pulled out his phone and scrolled through messages from his assistant coach about tomorrow's schedule. The community center had been his passion project after leaving the service. Something about helping kids find their strength and teaching seniors to protect themselves filled a space inside him that had been hollow since his last deployment. The bell above the door jingled again, but Andre didn't look up right away. It was the sudden hush that fell over the diner that caught his attention. He glanced up to see 5 men in leather vests entering, their heavy boots thudding against the worn linoleum floor. The patches on their vests made Andre's jaw tighten slightly, symbols he recognized from briefings on domestic hate groups during his time in the service. Andre returned his attention to his phone, but his awareness had shifted. He noted their positions without looking up, tracked their movements by sound. The military had taught him to gather information without revealing his interest. The bikers settled into a booth across the diner, their laughter too loud for the quiet Sunday morning crowd. Dottie brought his food, setting the plate down with a wink. "Enjoy, Coach." Andre thanked her and began eating, keeping his movements relaxed despite the prickle of awareness along his spine. He'd seen their type before, men who built their identity on hatred because they had nothing else to hold on to. Usually he could eat his meal and leave without issue. Live and let live had been his motto since moving to this small town. Between bites of crispy bacon, Andre's mind wandered back to his plans for the center. The building needed a new roof before winter and funding was tight. He'd been saving from his military pension, but it wouldn't be enough. Maybe that grant application would come through. "You see what they're letting in here these days?" The voice from the biker's table was deliberately loud. Andre kept eating, his expression neutral. He'd faced worse than words during his 15 years as a SEAL. Sticks and stones, as his mother would say. His phone buzzed with a text from Ms. Taylor, the elderly woman who helped with administrative work at the center. She was asking about ordering new equipment for the youth boxing program. Andre smiled slightly as he typed a response. That program had turned around so many kids heading down dangerous paths. The memory of Devin, a troubled teen who'd shown up at the center 8 months ago with anger in his eyes and bruises on his knuckles, came to mind. Last week, Devin had helped a younger kid perfect his jab, showing the same patience Andre had shown him. That's what the work was about. Passing on not just skills but values, I said. "You listening over there?" The voice was closer now. Andre looked up to see one of the bikers standing at the end of his table, The man was tall and wiry with a patchy beard and arms covered in faded tattoos. Behind him, his friends watched with smirks. "Just trying to enjoy my breakfast," Andre said evenly, his voice calm and measured. "Same as you, I imagine." The biker snorted. "Don't imagine we're the same as anything, boy." Andre took a slow sip of his coffee, his eyes never leaving the man's. He'd faced down warlords and terrorists. This man-child with hatred in his eyes didn't even register as a threat. But Andre knew that sometimes the most dangerous people were those with something to prove. "I'm not looking for trouble," Andre said, setting down his cup. "Just passing through on my way home." "Where's home?" "Back across the border?" Another biker had joined the first. This one shorter but broader, with a shaved head and a scar running through his right eyebrow. Andre didn't answer. He'd learned long ago that engaging with hate only fed it. Instead, he pulled out his wallet and placed enough cash on the table to cover his meal and a generous tip. "Excuse me," he said, standing to his full height. The movement was fluid and controlled, the motion of a man completely comfortable in his own skin and capabilities. For a moment, the bikers seemed surprised by his size. Andre stood several inches taller than the tallest among them, his shoulders broader, his presence somehow filling more space than seemed possible. "You boys causing trouble in my diner?" Dottie appeared with the coffee pot, her free hand on her hip. "Because I just got off the phone with Sheriff Reeves, and he says he can be here in 5 minutes if I need him." The bikers exchanged glances. "Just having a friendly chat," the first one said, though his tone suggested anything but friendliness. "Well, chat's over," Dottie said firmly. "Either sit down and order or leave." Andre used the moment to step away from the table. "Thanks for breakfast, Dottie. Best in the county, as always." "Anytime, Coach," she replied, her eyes communicating silent support. As Andre walked toward the door, he felt the biker's stares burning into his back. His training had taught him never to turn his back on a threat, but sometimes walking away was the strongest move. Not because he couldn't handle whatever they might try, but because he chose a different path. Outside, the air felt cooler than when he'd arrived. Or maybe it was just the contrast to the heated tension inside. Andre walked toward his truck, keys in hand, mentally calculating how long it would take to get home and whether he should stop by the center to check on that leaky pipe in the men's locker room. The sound of the diner door opening behind him didn't make him turn, nor did the heavy footsteps following him across the gravel lot. But when he heard the distinctive sound of a knife being flicked open, Andre's world shifted into the crystal-clear focus that had kept him alive in combat zones across the globe. This wasn't how he'd planned to spend his Sunday morning. But some lessons, it seemed, needed to be taught the hard way. Andre didn't turn around right away. Instead, he continued walking toward his truck at the same measured pace, his mind rapidly assessing the situation. 5 men had entered the diner. Based on the footsteps behind him, he guessed 3 had followed him out. The gravel lot was empty except for his blue pickup, their motorcycles, and 2 other cars parked far from the entrance. No witnesses outside. But the diner windows offered a clear view of the parking lot. "Hey, I'm talking to you," called the wiry biker with the patchy beard. "You deaf or something?" Andre stopped beside his truck, keys still in hand, and finally turned to face them. 3 men stood in a loose semicircle about 10 feet away. The wiry one in front, likely the leader, held a switchblade down by his side. The bald one with the scar stood to his right, and a third man, heavy-set with a gray-streaked beard, flanked his left. "I meant what I said inside," Andre replied calmly. "I'm not looking for trouble," the leader snorted. "Should have thought about that before you came to our town." "I live here," Andre said simply. "Have for 3 years now." 3 years too long," the bald one spat on the ground. "We don't take kindly to your kind around these parts." Andre noticed the diner door open again. The remaining 2 bikers emerged, hanging back near the entrance. Dottie appeared in the window, phone pressed to her ear, her face tight with concern. Good. At least someone was calling for help. Not that he needed it, but he'd prefer to avoid using the skills that had kept him alive through 3 tours in the world's most dangerous places. "Look," Andre said, his deep voice remaining level. "I don't know you men and you don't know me. Let's keep it that way." The leader took a step forward, knife glinting in the morning sun. "Oh, I know everything I need to know about you. Think you can just come here, act like you belong?" "I run the community center over on Maple Street," Andre said, deciding to try a different approach. You boys ever need a place to work out, learn some boxing, you're welcome there. First week's free. He kept his tone friendly, open, though his body remained alert to every movement. This seemed to confuse them momentarily. The bald one frowned, while the heavy-set man exchanged glances with the leader. You think we'd set foot in any place you run? The leader recovered, his voice sharp with renewed anger. You trying to make fools of us? Andre sighed inwardly. Some people were determined to hate no matter what. He'd seen it overseas and he saw it here. Fear twisted into hate, hate hardened into violence. The same sad story playing out across time and borders. My mistake, Andre said. Now if you'll excuse me, I've got work to do. He turned toward his truck door, though he remained acutely aware of every movement behind him. Don't you turn your back on me. The leader's voice cracked with rage. Andre heard the rush of footsteps on gravel. Without looking, he knew the man was charging, knife extended. 15 years of training took over. Andre pivoted smoothly, his left hand catching the man's knife wrist, while his right palm struck the attacker's chest with just enough force to stagger him backward without causing serious harm. The knife clattered to the gravel. Don't, Andre said quietly. The leader stumbled but kept his feet. His face flushed red with humiliation and rage. Get him! He shouted to his companions. The bald man charged next, throwing a wild haymaker that Andre easily sidestepped. The heavy-set man hung back, looking suddenly uncertain. I don't want to hurt you, Andre warned, backing up to keep all three men in his field of vision. Walk away now. You threatening us? The leader had recovered his balance, though not his knife. That's 3 against 1, smart guy. Andre didn't bother correcting his math. Quality mattered more than quantity in a fight. And these men, despite their intimidating appearances, moved like amateurs, all fury and no discipline. The bald man circled to Andre's right while the leader moved left, trying to flank him. The heavy-set man finally committed, stepping forward to complete the triangle. Inside the diner, faces pressed against the window, Andre noticed Dottie pointing urgently down the road. The sheriff must be on his way. Last chance, Andre offered. Sheriff's coming. No one's been hurt yet. We can all walk away. Only one walking away is us, the leader snarled. After we teach you a lesson. They rushed him at once, converging from 3 directions. Andre moved with the fluid precision that had become second nature during countless close-quarters combat training sessions. He stepped inside the bald man's punch, using the attacker's momentum to guide him into the path of the heavy-set man. Both stumbled, colliding awkwardly. The leader came in low, attempting to tackle Andre around the waist. Andre pivoted, using his hip as a fulcrum to redirect the man's charge. The leader sprawled face first into the gravel with a pained grunt. Stay down, Andre advised. This doesn't need to go further. But rage and wounded pride drove the men back to their feet. The bald man pulled a set of brass knuckles from his pocket, slipping them over his fingers. Now you're gonna get it, he promised, spitting blood from his split lip. Andre felt a familiar calm settle over him, the combat clarity that slowed time and sharpened senses. He didn't want to hurt these men, but he wasn't about to let them hurt him either. The bald man swung again, the brass knuckles whistling through empty air as Andre leaned back just enough for the punch to miss his chin by inches. Before the man could recover his balance, Andre struck, a precise open-handed blow to the solar plexus that left his attacker gasping for breath. The heavy-set man hesitated, then charged with a roar. Andre sidestepped, caught the man's arm, and used a simple wrist lock to guide him face first into the side of the truck. Not hard enough to cause serious injury, but enough to daze him. The leader had regained his knife and slashed wildly at Andre's midsection. Andre caught his wrist again, this time applying pressure to a nerve point that made the man's fingers spring open involuntarily. The knife fell once more. In one continuous motion, Andre swept the leader's legs and controlled his descent to the ground, pinning him with a knee across his chest. The entire confrontation had lasted less than 30 seconds. Stay down, Andre's voice remained calm but carried an unmistakable command. The voice of someone used to being obeyed in life or death situations. The 2 bikers who had hung back by the diner entrance now approached cautiously. That's enough, called one, a tall man with a gray ponytail. Let him up. Andre assessed the newcomers, noting they hadn't joined the attack but weren't backing down either. He remained in position, keeping the leader pinned. Tell your friends to stand down, Andre said to the pinned leader. No one needs to get hurt today. Pride warred with pain in the man's eyes. Finally, he gave a tight nod. "Back off," he called to his companions. "For now." Andre released him and stood in one smooth motion, backing toward his truck while keeping all 5 men in view. The distant wail of a siren broke the tense silence. "This ain't over," the leader promised, getting to his feet and wiping blood from his nose. "It can be," Andre replied, "or it can get worse. Your choice." The gray ponytailed man helped the heavyset biker to his feet. The bald man was still struggling to catch his breath, bent over with hands on knees. "Cops are coming," said Ponytail. "Let's go." The bikers retreated to their motorcycles, the 3 who had attacked Andre moving stiffly. As engines roared to life, the leader pointed 2 fingers at his own eyes. Then at Andre, the universal "I'm watching you" gesture. Andre stood motionless beside his truck as they pulled away, gravel spraying from beneath their tires. Only when they disappeared down the highway did he allow his shoulders to relax slightly. The diner door burst open, and Dottie hurried across the parking lot, her face pale with concern. "Are you hurt?" she asked, looking him over for injuries. "I'm fine," Andre assured her. "They're not." Dottie's eyes widened. "Where did you learn to fight like that?" "I've never seen anything like it," Andre shrugged. Here and there, a sheriff's cruiser pulled into the lot, lights flashing. Sheriff Reeves, a stocky man with salt and pepper hair, stepped out and surveyed the scene. "Dottie called about some trouble," he said, approaching them. "Those bikers I passed on the way in?" Andre nodded. "Just a misunderstanding." "Misunderstanding, my foot!" Dottie exclaimed. "They came after him with knives, Roy. 3-on-1. Sheriff Reeves raised an eyebrow at Andre. "That true?" "They took exception to my presence," Andre said diplomatically. "It got heated. And you handled it?" The sheriff looked impressed despite himself. "All 3? "Coach teaches self-defense at the community center," Dottie explained proudly. "Turns out he's pretty good at it himself." The sheriff studied Andre with new interest. "That's so. Well, Mr. Mitchell." "Andre Mitchell?" "Mr. Mitchell. Those men are part of a group we've had trouble with before. They usually roll through town a few times a year, cause problems, then move on. But lately they've been hanging around more, setting up some kind of clubhouse out by the old mill." Andre nodded. "Good to know. I'll need a statement about what happened here," the sheriff continued. "And we should probably talk about—" "Sheriff," one of the diner patrons called from the entrance. "Got a call from dispatch. Those bikers just caused a wreck on Highway 16. Sounds like they were driving reckless." Sheriff Reeves sighed. "Never ends." He turned back to Andre. "Rain check on that statement? Come by the station tomorrow if you can." "Will do," Andre agreed. As the sheriff hurried back to his cruiser, Dottie touched Andre's arm. "You sure you're okay?" "Never better," Andre said, though that wasn't entirely true. The confrontation had awakened something he'd tried to leave behind when he left the service. A heightened state of alertness, the constant assessment of threats. He'd moved to Pine Creek hoping for peace, not this. "Those men," Dottie said quietly, "they'll be back. They're not the type to forget." Andre nodded, watching the sheriff's cruiser disappear down the highway. "I know." What Dottie didn't know, what no one in Pine Creek knew, was that Andre Mitchell had spent 15 years handling much worse threats than a handful of small-town bikers. If they came back, he would be ready. But as he climbed into his truck and started the engine, Andre couldn't help feeling that the peaceful life he'd been building here had just gotten considerably more complicated. The community center on Maple Street was quiet when Andre pulled into the small parking lot. Sunday afternoons were typically slow. Just a few dedicated teenagers using the weight room and the occasional adult dropping in for open gym hours. Today, only 2 cars sat in the lot. A battered red Corolla that belonged to Lee, the college student who worked weekends at the front desk, and a familiar white Subaru that made Andre smile despite the tension still lingering in his shoulders. He grabbed his gym bag from the passenger seat and headed inside, pausing to examine a small crack in the front window that hadn't been there Friday. Vandalism wasn't common in Pine Creek, but it wasn't unheard of either. He made a mental note to call the glass repair shop tomorrow. The lobby smelled of floor cleaner and old sweat, a scent Andre had come to associate with purpose and progress. Trophies from local youth competitions lined a shelf behind the front desk, where Lee was deeply focused on a textbook. "Hey, Coach," Lee said, looking up with a smile that quickly faded. "Whoa, what happened to you?" Andre glanced down and noticed a smear of dirt on his shirt and a small tear at the shoulder. Remnants of the parking lot confrontation. Minor disagreement with some out-of-towners, he said, keeping his tone light. Nothing serious. Lee looked skeptical but didn't push. Smart kid. At 21, he was studying engineering at the community college while working part-time at the center. Well, Ms. Rosario's in the office. Said she needed to talk to you about the grant proposal. Andre nodded his thanks and headed down the hallway, his footsteps echoing against the worn linoleum floor. Pictures of community center members lined the walls. Children proudly holding up art projects, seniors in self-defense poses, teenagers showing off basketball trophies. Each face represented a life touched by this place, a sanctuary Andre had built from the ground up after leaving behind a world of violence and shadows. He knocked twice on the office door before pushing it open. Carmen Rosario looked up from a stack of papers, her reading glasses perched on the end of her nose. At 62, she was a force of nature, a retired high school principal who had volunteered to help with the center's administration and ended up becoming Andre's right hand and running the place. There you are, she said, removing her glasses. Her eyes narrowed immediately. What happened? Andre sometimes wondered if Carmen had been an interrogator in a previous life. Nothing got past her. Had a run-in with some bikers at Rosie's, he admitted, setting his bag down and dropping into the chair across from her desk. Nothing I couldn't handle. Those same ones causing trouble over in Riverdale last month? Carmen asked, concern etching lines around her mouth. Andre raised an eyebrow. You heard about them? My nephew's on the county sheriff's department, she reminded him. Said some motorcycle gang has been growing bolder, harassing people of color, causing property damage. She leaned forward. Did they target you specifically? Andre considered downplaying it but decided against it. Carmen deserved the truth. Yeah, they did. Her jaw tightened, but she simply nodded. You report it? Sheriff Reeves showed up. Asked me to come in tomorrow to give a statement. Andre rubbed his neck, feeling the day's tension. How's the grant application coming? Carmen allowed the subject change, though her eyes said the conversation wasn't over. Almost finished. If we get this funding, we can finally fix that roof and expand the after-school program. They spent the next hour reviewing the proposal, making final edits, and discussing budget allocations. Work had always been Andre's refuge, a place to focus his energy and skills on building rather than destroying. By the time they finished, the knot of tension in his shoulders had loosened slightly. Oh, I almost forgot, Carmen said as she gathered her papers. Your Navy friend stopped by yesterday looking for you. Andre stilled. Navy friend? Tall guy, buzz cut. Rodriguez, I think he said? Mentioned you served together. Ice settled in Andre's stomach. He hadn't seen Tony Rodriguez in nearly 4 years, not since they'd both left the teams. They'd kept in sporadic contact, birthday texts, Christmas cards, but an unannounced visit wasn't Tony's style. Did he say what he wanted? Carmen shook her head. Just that he was passing through and wanted to catch up. Left his number. She handed Andre a sticky note with a phone number scrawled on it. Old friend? Yeah, Andre said, pocketing the note. From another life. After Carmen left, Andre locked the office and walked through the center, checking doors and windows. The Sunday afternoon crowd had dwindled to just a couple of teenagers shooting hoops in the gym. He watched them for a moment, smiling at their good-natured trash talk and impressive moves. Locking up in 15 minutes? Guys, he called one of the teens Dion. A lanky 16-year-old with incredible natural talent, dribbled over to the sideline. Hey coach, you still doing that special training tomorrow after school? Andre nodded. 4 o'clock sharp. Bring your homework too, we review that first, remember? Dion grinned. Already finished it. Been working on that crossover you showed me. Show me now, Andre challenged, setting down his bag. Dion's face lit up as he demonstrated the basketball move, his form much improved from last week. Andre provided a few corrections, then let the boys finish their game while he continued his security checks. By the time he locked the front door behind the teens, evening shadows were stretching across the parking lot. Andre stood for a moment, keys in hand, surveying the quiet street. No sign of motorcycles or unfamiliar vehicles. Still, a prickle of awareness danced along his spine, the same feeling that had kept him alive in hostile territory overseas. His truck started with a reassuring rumble. As he pulled onto Maple Street, Andre noticed a dark SUV parked half a block down, its windows tinted. It hadn't been there when he arrived. He drove past it slowly, noting the out-of-state plates, but couldn't see who was inside. Coincidence, maybe. But Andre hadn't survived 3 tours by believing in coincidences. His small house sat on a quiet street at the edge of town. Nothing fancy, just a 2-bedroom ranch with a covered porch and a detached garage. He'd chosen it precisely because it offered good visibility in all directions and limited approach routes. Old habits. Andre parked in the driveway and did a quick visual sweep of the property before retrieving his mail and heading inside. The house was cool and dark, exactly as he'd left it Friday morning. He moved through the rooms with practiced efficiency, checking windows and closets before finally allowing himself to relax. Standing in his kitchen, Andre pulled out his phone and the sticky note with Tony's number. He stared at it for a long moment before dialing. Tony answered on the 3rd ring. "Took you long enough, Mitchell." Despite everything, Andre smiled at the familiar voice. "Rodriguez, heard you came looking for me. Been in town 2 days trying to track you down. You're a hard man to find for someone who runs a community center." "What brings you to Pine Creek?" Andre asked, cutting to the chase. "Not exactly on the way to anywhere." A pause. "We need to talk in person. You free tonight?" The seriousness in Tony's voice set off warning bells. "Everything okay?" "Not really. But it's better discussed face to face. You still living in that boring house with the blue shutters?" Andre chuckled despite his concern. "Still here. You remember how to find it?" "Be there in 20. After hanging up, Andre stood motionless in his kitchen, mind racing. Tony Rodriguez had been his second in command for 2 tours, a man he'd trusted with his life countless times. They'd seen and done things that most civilians couldn't imagine, operating in the shadows to protect American interests abroad. If Tony was here, it wasn't for a casual reunion. Andre opened his refrigerator and pulled out 2 beers, then reconsidered and put them back. Whatever Tony needed to discuss, he wanted a clear head for it. He was setting out coffee mugs when his phone buzzed with a text. "Unknown number. Saw what you did to our boys. You're dead." Andre stared at the message, neither surprised nor particularly concerned. Thugs with wounded pride often made threats they couldn't back up. Still, he took a screenshot and forwarded it to Sheriff Reeves with a brief explanation. His phone buzzed again almost immediately. Another text, same unknown number. "We know where you live." That gave him pause. The bikers shouldn't know where he lived. He'd been careful about maintaining privacy. Since moving to Pine Creek, an instinct born from years operating in environments where personal information could be weaponized. A knock at the front door interrupted his thoughts. Tony was early. Andre moved silently through the living room, automatically positioning himself to the side of the door rather than directly in front of it. "Who is it?" "It's me," came Tony's voice. "And we've got problems." Andre checked through the peephole. Tony stood on the porch alone, his posture tense but not alarmed. Andre opened the door and the 2 men clasped hands, pulling each other into a brief, firm embrace. "Good to see you, brother," Tony said, stepping inside. He looked older than Andre remembered. More gray in his close-cropped hair, new lines around his eyes. But he still moved with the controlled precision of a man who'd spent years in high-risk environments. "You too," Andre replied, closing and locking the door. "Now what kind of trouble are we talking about?" Tony's expression turned grim. "Heard you had a run-in with some bikers today." Andre's eyes narrowed. "News travels fast. It wasn't random. Andre, they knew who you were." A chill settled over Andre as pieces began clicking into place. The bikers at the diner. The confrontation that felt targeted, the text messages, Tony's unexpected visit. "How?" Andre asked quietly. "I've been careful." Tony ran a hand over his face. "Remember that op in Kandahar? The one that went sideways?" Andre nodded slowly. It had been one of their most difficult missions, extracting a high-value target from a heavily guarded compound. The mission had succeeded, but not without costs. "The target's brother," Tony continued, "spent the last 4 years tracking down everyone involved. He's got resources, connections, and now he's found you." Outside, the distant rumble of motorcycles broke the evening quiet, growing steadily louder. Tony and Andre exchanged a look that communicated volumes without words. "How many?" Andre asked, already moving toward the window. "At least a dozen that I've confirmed," Tony replied grimly. Using local muscle as cover, Andre peered through the blinds. Headlights appeared at the end of his street. multiple vehicles approaching slowly. "Those bikers today," Andre said, understanding dawning. "They were reconnaissance," Tony nodded. "Testing your skills, confirming your identity. And now they're coming to finish the job," Andre finished. He stepped away from the window, his mind shifting into the familiar, focused state of combat readiness. Good thing they don't know who they're really dealing with. The motorcycles drew closer, engines growling like predators in the night. Andre's quiet life in Pine Creek had just collided with the violent past he'd tried to leave behind, and despite the danger, or perhaps because of it, he felt more alive than he had in years. Andre moved through his house with swift efficiency, muscle memory from years of operations guiding his actions. He pulled a metal lockbox from the back of his closet and entered the combination. Inside lay a Glock 19, a reminder of his past life that he'd hoped never to need again. Still keeping it simple. "I see," Tony remarked, checking his own weapon. "Don't need fancy to get the job done," Andre replied, loading the handgun and securing it in a holster at his waist. He covered it with his jacket. The rumble of motorcycles grew louder, then cut off abruptly. Silence fell, more unnerving than the noise had been. "How many exits did you set up in this place?" Tony asked, peering through the blinds. "3, Andre said, a hint of a smile crossing his face. "Plus 2 that aren't obvious," Tony nodded approvingly. Always prepared. Andre moved to his kitchen and opened a drawer filled with ordinary utensils. He pressed a hidden switch, revealing a false bottom containing a satellite phone, cash, and a set of lockpicks. He pocketed the phone. "Sheriff Reeves seems decent," Andre said, thinking aloud. "But response time out here is at least 15 minutes. "We'll be long gone by then," Tony assured him. "Cars parked 2 blocks over." Andre raised an eyebrow. "You anticipated this?" "I've been tracking these guys for weeks," Tony explained. "They hit Lee Chen in Seattle last month, Pete Walsh in Boise last week." Cold dread settled in Andre's stomach. Lee and Pete had both been on the Kandahar mission. "Dead?" Tony's grim expression was answer enough. "They're working down the list. You're number 3. The sound of boots on gravel reached them, multiple people approaching from different directions. Andre mentally calculated 5 bikers from the diner plus whoever Tony had identified. At least a dozen hostiles surrounding a civilian residence. Just another day at the office, once upon a time. "Front and back," Andre whispered, gesturing. "They'll try to cover all exits. Just like Fallujah," Tony murmured. "Except we don't have air support," Andre replied dryly. A sudden crash from the back of the house. Someone testing the kitchen door. Andre and Tony exchanged glances, communicating silently as only men who'd faced death together could. Andre's phone buzzed with an incoming call. "Sheriff Reeves." He answered quickly, keeping his voice low. "Bit busy right now, Sheriff." "Got your text about the threats," Reeves replied. "Everything okay out there?" "Not exactly. Got about a dozen unwanted visitors surrounding my place. Some are the bikers from this morning." A sharp intake of breath. "Armed?" "Most likely. And they're not just local troublemakers. My friend's been tracking them. They've killed 2 veterans in the last month." "Jesus," Reeves muttered. "I'm sending everyone I've got, but Mitchell..." "We'll be fine," Andre cut in. "Just make sure your people identify themselves clearly when they arrive." He ended the call and turned to Tony. "Law enforcement's on the way. 15 minutes, maybe more." "We need to be gone in 5, Tony said. "These guys won't wait around once they realize who they're dealing with." As if on cue, a voice called from outside. "Mitchell!" "We know you're in there. Come out and face us like a man." Andre recognized the voice of the wiry biker leader from the diner. He moved to the window and chanced a quick look. In the glow of streetlights, he counted 8 motorcycles parked along the curb. The bikers stood in a loose formation, some holding baseball bats, others with hands suspiciously near their waistbands. Behind them idled 2 black SUVs with tinted windows. "Local muscle up front," Andre observed. "The real threat's hanging back watching." Tony nodded. "Kandahar's brother likes to outsource the dirty work." Another crash, louder this time, someone testing the side door. "Time to move," Andre decided. "Plan B." Tony grinned, recognizing their old code. "Lead the way, Chief." Andre crossed to the hallway linen closet and pushed aside towels to reveal a small access panel. He removed it and gestured for Tony to follow as he crawled into the narrow space. "You built an escape tunnel from your linen closet?" Tony whispered, impressed. "Paranoid much?" "Prepared." Andre corrected as they emerged into the attached garage through a similar panel hidden behind storage shelves. And it's not paranoia if they're really after you. The garage was dark and smelled of motor oil and cut grass. Andre's motorcycle sat in one corner, covered with a tarp. He pulled the cover off and wheeled the bike toward the side door. "They'll have someone watching the garage," Tony warned. "Counting on it," Andre replied. He reached into a cabinet and pulled out a small remote detonator. "Remember Bosnia?" Tony's eyes widened. "You didn't—" "Nothing lethal," Andre assured him. "Just some flashbangs rigged to the front and back doors. Enough distraction to cover our exit. You've been living as a small-town community center director for 3 years." Tony said incredulously. "When did you have time to set all this up?" Andre shrugged. "Weekends. Couldn't sleep sometimes. Old habits," a voice outside, "Closer now. Check the garage." Andre tensed, listening to footsteps approaching the side door. He positioned himself beside it, signaling Tony to stand ready with the motorcycle. The door handle turned slowly. Andre pressed the detonator. Twin explosions rocked the night. Bright flashes and thunderous booms from the front and back of the house. Shouts of confusion and pain erupted as the flashbangs did their job, temporarily blinding and disorienting anyone nearby. In one smooth motion, Andre yanked open the side door, grabbed the stunned biker who'd been about to enter and pulled him inside. A quick strike to the solar plexus dropped the man to his knees, gasping for air. Andre zip-tied his hands behind his back and relieved him of a knife and pistol. "Stay put and you'll live through this," Andre told him before turning to Tony. "Now." Tony kick-started the motorcycle as Andre opened the main garage door. Through the opening they could see chaos. Bikers and dark-clothed men stumbling around, temporarily blinded by the flashbangs. "Go," Andre shouted, jumping on behind Tony. The motorcycle roared to life, shooting out of the garage and weaving through the disoriented attackers. Someone fired wildly, bullets going wide in the confusion. Andre felt the familiar rush of adrenaline, the heightened awareness where time seemed to slow and every detail stood out in crystal clarity. As they sped past one of the black SUVs, Andre noted the driver inside, a man with distinctive scarring along his jaw. Their eyes met for a split second and Andre knew immediately. This was their real target, the brother seeking revenge for Kandahar. The motorcycle raced down the quiet residential street, leaving behind shouts and the growing wail of distant sirens. Tony took a sharp turn onto a side street, then another, putting distance between them and their pursuers. "They'll follow," Andre said into Tony's ear over the wind. "Counting on it," Tony replied, echoing Andre's earlier words. "Got a surprise waiting 2 miles east." Andre grinned despite the gravity of the situation. Working with Tony again felt like slipping on a well-worn glove, comfortable and familiar in the midst of danger. 5 minutes later, they reached an abandoned gas station on the outskirts of town. Tony cut the engine and coasted behind the building where a dark sedan waited. "Transportation taken care of," Tony explained as they abandoned the motorcycle, "and I called in some friends for backup." As if on cue, 2 men emerged from the shadows beside the sedan, faces Andre hadn't seen in years but would recognize anywhere. Jin Park and Mike Weston, the remaining members of their former unit. "Took you long enough," Jin said with a half-smile. "Traffic," Andre replied dryly, clasping hands with his old teammates. Mike popped the trunk, revealing an arsenal that would make most police departments envious. "Got your message, Rodriguez. Figured you might need some help." The reunion was cut short by the distant sound of motorcycles and engines. "They're following our trail," Andre said, checking his watch. "Sheriff's probably at my house by now." "Good," Tony said. "That'll keep the local muscle busy." But the real threat's still coming. The 4 men moved with practiced coordination, selecting weapons and checking equipment. No wasted motion, no unnecessary words, just the smooth efficiency of a team that had faced death together many times before. "Plan?" Jin asked, loading a rifle. Andre surveyed their position. The abandoned gas station sat at a crossroads, with clear sight lines in all directions. A defensible position, but not ideal for a prolonged standoff. "We're not here to fight," he decided. "We're here to end this. The brother's in the lead SUV. I saw him. He's the head of the snake." Tony nodded in agreement. "Cut off the head, the body dies. The local bikers are just hired help. They'll scatter once their paycheck is gone." "So we capture the brother," Mike concluded. Turn him over to the authorities. With evidence of the Seattle and Boise killings, Tony added. I've been building a case for months. The sound of engines grew louder. Headlights appeared on the horizon, approaching fast. 2 SUVs, at least 6 bikes. Jin reported from his vantage point. Andre felt a familiar calm settle over him, the combat clarity that had served him through countless operations. Mike, Jin, create a diversion on the eastern approach. Tony and I will circle behind and take the primary target. Non-lethal if possible, but these guys have already killed 2 of our own. Don't take unnecessary risks. The team dispersed to their positions. Andre and Tony crouched behind a rusted dumpster, watching as the convoy approached. The motorcycles came first, scouts checking the area, followed by the SUVs moving more cautiously. Just like old times, Tony murmured. Andre shook his head. I left this life for a reason, Tony. And now it found you anyway. Before Andre could respond, a series of small explosions erupted along the eastern perimeter, Mike and Jin's diversion. The motorcycles veered toward the commotion, leaving the SUVs momentarily exposed. Now, Andre commanded, and they moved, 2 shadows slipping between pools of darkness, approaching the lead vehicle from behind. The driver's door opened as the man with the scarred jaw emerged, barking orders to his subordinates. Andre recognized the accent immediately, the same as the target they'd extracted from Kandahar years ago. Tony signaled that he would take the driver while Andre focused on their primary target. They closed the distance in seconds, moving in perfect sync as they had on countless missions. What happened next would later be described in Sheriff Reeves's official report as a masterclass in tactical efficiency. In less than 30 seconds, 4 highly trained former special operators neutralized a threat that had eluded law enforcement across 3 states. As sirens approached once more, Andre zip-tied the hands of the scarred man who had orchestrated the deaths of his former teammates. The man glared up at him with undisguised hatred. You took my brother, he spat. Your brother was building bombs to kill American soldiers, Andre replied evenly. We had orders to bring him in alive, and we did. And now you'll pay me's over, Andre cut him off. Your vendetta ends tonight. Sheriff Reeves's cruiser pulled up, followed by 3 more patrol cars. The sheriff emerged, gun drawn, taking in the scene with wide eyes. 4 men standing calmly among a group of subdued attackers. Mitchell? Reeves called uncertainly. What in God's name happened here? Andre stepped forward, holstering his weapon. Long story, Sheriff, but I think we just solved several open murder cases for you. As law enforcement secured the scene and began processing suspects, Andre stood apart with his former teammates. Feeling the weight of the past few hours, what now? Tony asked quietly. Andre looked back toward town, toward the life he'd built, the community center, the kids who counted on him. Now I go home. These guys might have friends, Mike warned. You could come back with us, lay low for a while. Andre shook his head. I'm done running. Pine Creek is my home now. Jin smiled slightly. The quiet life. As quiet as it gets for guys like us, Andre replied. He looked at his watch, nearly midnight. I've got teenagers coming for basketball training tomorrow afternoon. Can't let them down. His 3 friends exchanged glances, then Tony spoke for all of them. Need some help rebuilding whatever they trashed at your place? For the first time that night, Andre felt the tension truly leave his shoulders. Could always use an extra pair of hands. Or 3. As they walked toward Sheriff Reeves to give their statements, Andre realized something important. He'd spent 3 years trying to leave his past behind, to become someone new. But tonight had shown him that his past, both the skills and the relationships, was part of who he was. He didn't have to choose between his former life and his current one. He could bring the best of both worlds together, and anyone who threatened the peace he'd built in Pine Creek would learn, just as the bikers had, exactly who they were dealing with. 3 weeks later, Andre stood in the community center gym, watching as a group of seniors practiced the self-defense moves he'd just taught them. The oldest, Mrs. Chen at 82, executed a perfect wrist escape that would have made his SEAL instructors proud. Excellent form, Mrs. Chen, Andre called out. Remember everyone, it's not about strength, it's about leverage and technique. Sunlight streamed through the newly replaced windows, casting warm rectangles across the polished floor. The damage to the center had been minimal, just some broken glass and graffiti on the outer walls. But the community's response had been overwhelming. The morning after the confrontation, Andre had arrived to find a dozen volunteers already scrubbing away the hateful words. Throughout the week, more people showed up, offering donations, labor, and support. What had been intended to frighten and divide had instead united the town in unexpected ways. "Coach," Dion approached, basketball tucked under his arm. "We still on for extra practice after school?" Andre checked his watch. 4 o'clock. "Don't be late," the teenager grinned. "Never am." He hesitated, then added in a lower voice, "My dad says those bikers won't be bothering anyone for a long time." News traveled fast in small towns. While Sheriff Reeves had kept many details confidential, everyone knew the basics. The bikers who'd been causing trouble weren't just local thugs, but part of a larger criminal network now facing federal charges. "Your dad's right," Andre assured him. "Focus on your studies and that jump shot." As Dion left for school, Andre continued observing the seniors' class. His phone buzzed with a text from Tony. "All clear on our end. Brother singing like a canary. Lee and Pete can rest easy now." A weight lifted from Andre's shoulders. The man responsible for killing his former teammates would face justice. The network he'd built to target veterans had been dismantled. Most importantly, the local bikers who'd been recruited as muscle were being charged as accessories to murder. Their days of terrorizing people were over. After class ended, Andre helped Mrs. Chen with her coat. "You're getting too good at this," he teased. "Going to put me out of a job." She patted his arm. "My grandson asked if I could teach him what I learned. He's being bullied at school." Her eyes, bright behind thick glasses, held a question. Andre nodded. "Bring him in Tuesday after school. We'll work with him together." Her grateful smile reminded Andre why he'd started the center in the first place. Not to escape his past, but to use the skills from that life to build something positive. In his office, Andre found Carmen organizing a stack of flyers for an upcoming community event. The grant application she'd completed had been approved, enough funding to repair the roof and expand their after-school programs. "Sheriff Reeves called," she said without looking up. "The last of those bikers took a plea deal this morning." Andre leaned against the doorframe. "Good news." "He also mentioned something interesting," Carmen continued, finally meeting his eyes. "Said the FBI agent in charge was very interested in your background. Apparently you're something of a legend in certain circles." Andre kept his expression neutral. "People exaggerate." Carmen's knowing look said she wasn't fooled. "The same way you exaggerated on your resume? Former security consultant doesn't quite cover what you really did, does it?" For a moment, Andre considered deflecting as he always had, keeping his past compartmentalized, separate from his present. But the events of recent weeks had shown how artificial that separation was. "No," he admitted. "It doesn't." Carmen nodded, accepting his honesty without pushing for details he couldn't share. "Well, whatever you did before, I'm glad you're here now. This town needs you more than whatever agency you worked for." Andre smiled. "I'm not going anywhere." After Carmen left, Andre checked his calendar for the day's remaining classes. Between the seniors' self-defense, youth basketball, and evening boxing sessions, the center stayed busy from open to close. Just how he liked it. A knock at the open door pulled his attention away from the schedule. Sheriff Reeves stood there, Stetson in hand. "Got a minute?" the sheriff asked. Andre gestured to the chair across from his desk. "What can I do for you?" Reeves settled into the seat with a sigh. "Just got off the phone with the FBI. They've connected our bikers to hate groups in 3 other states. What happened here was just the tip of the iceberg." "Good to hear they're digging deeper," Andre replied. "The thing is," Reeves continued, "they mentioned they could use someone with your particular background." As a consultant on this case, Andre raised an eyebrow. "I'm retired. That's what I told them," Reeves said with a small smile. "But they're persistent. Asked me to give you this." He placed a business card on the desk. "Said to call if you change your mind." Andre picked up the card, studying the federal emblem. Once he might have been tempted. The familiar rush of high-stakes operations was hard to leave behind completely. But as he glanced through his office window at the center filled with people who counted on him, the choice was clear. "I appreciate them thinking of me," Andre said, slipping the card into his desk drawer. "But I've got my hands full here." Reeves nodded, seeming relieved. "Figured you'd say that. Town wouldn't be the same without you in this place." He stood to leave, then paused. One more thing. The mayor wants to give you some kind of commendation at next month's town council meeting. For your service to the community. Andre frowned. That's not necessary. Maybe not to you, Reeves replied. But it means something to folks around here. Especially now. After the sheriff left, Andre walked through the center, stopping to help a young girl correct her boxing stance, answer questions from a volunteer, and check on a leaky pipe in the men's locker room. Ordinary problems that required no specialized tactical training or weapons, just attention and care. By late afternoon, the basketball court was filled with teenagers. Dion had arrived early, as promised, and was helping younger kids practice their dribbling. Andre watched with pride as the teen showed patience and encouragement with each child, qualities he'd struggled with himself. When he first joined the program, he's got potential as a coach, observed a familiar voice beside him. Andre turned to find Tony leaning against the wall, dressed in civilian clothes that couldn't quite hide his military bearing. Thought you'd be halfway to Washington by now, Andre said, surprised but pleased to see his friend. Tony shrugged. Flight's not until tomorrow. Figured I'd stop by, see this place you're so determined to stay for. They watched the practice in companionable silence for a few minutes before Tony spoke again. You know, when they sent me to warn you about the brothers' vendetta, I half expected to find you miserable. Playing civilian, hiding from who you really are. He gestured around the gym. But this isn't hiding, is it? Andre shook his head. Took me a while to figure that out myself. The guys send their regards, Tony continued. Jin's back with his family in California. Mike's considering retirement too. Said what you've built here got him thinking. Tell him there's always room for another coach, Andre offered. Kids can't get enough positive male role models. Tony nodded thoughtfully. I might take you up on that myself someday. When I'm done chasing ghosts around the world. Andre clapped his friend on the shoulder. Door's always open. After Tony left, Andre joined the basketball practice, running drills and offering guidance until the last teenager had gone home. As he locked up the center for the evening, he paused to look back at the building. The sign above the door now bore a fresh coat of paint. Pine Creek Community Center, a place for everyone. The walk home took him past Rosie's Diner, where Dottie waved cheerfully through the window. Further down, he passed the sheriff's office, the town library, and the small park where he sometimes ran on weekend mornings. Familiar places, familiar faces, a community that had embraced him even before they knew what he was capable of. His house looked different now, not just the repaired windows and fresh paint covering the damage from the attack, but in how Andre saw it. No longer just a strategic location with good sight lines and multiple escape routes, but a home. His home. On the porch sat a package wrapped in brown paper. The return address made him smile, Tony's handwriting. Inside, Andre found a framed photo he hadn't seen in years. His former team, standing together in a desert landscape, arms around each other's shoulders. Young, proud, unaware of how the missions they undertook would echo through their lives for years to come. Andre placed the photo on his mantle, alongside newer images, the community center's opening day, last year's youth basketball championship team, the seniors' self-defense class graduation, different chapters of the same life, his life. His phone buzzed with a message from Carmen. Roof contractor coming tomorrow at 9. Also, newspaper wants to interview you about the expanded after-school program. Once, Andre Mitchell had operated in the shadows, his name and face unknown to all but a select few. Now he stood in the light, known and needed by an entire community. The next morning, he arrived at the center early, unlocking the doors and turning on the lights. The building hummed to life around him, not with the adrenaline rush of combat, but with something steadier, more sustaining. As the first class of the day filed in, mothers with young children for the parent and tot tumbling session, Andre greeted each by name. A little boy with curly hair ran ahead of his mother and wrapped his arms around Andre's legs in an enthusiastic hug. Coach, I did my somersault all by myself yesterday. Andre knelt down to the child's level. That's fantastic, buddy. Want to show me? As the boy demonstrated his new skill, Andre felt the familiar certainty that had guided him through countless missions. He was exactly where he needed to be, doing exactly what he was meant to do. The former Navy SEAL had found a new mission, not destroying enemies but building community. Not surviving hostile territory but creating safe spaces. Not fighting darkness but spreading light. And anyone who threatened that mission would learn, as the bikers had, exactly who they were dealing with.